And so they are pretty much in any industry you might be thinking about. And you look and see, maybe it's based on where you'd like to live or work for a summer. Maybe it's based on what type of work you'd like to do. They tend to be summer internships as opposed to a co-op program. Some are paid, some are unpaid, but the Career Center is really a great starting point for those. There's also, I know, for example, if you're interested in engineering, the engineering department or engineering school will have employers contacting them. And in fact, a couple of years ago, I was at our engineering open house, which happens to be tomorrow this year, but I was walking with the dean of undergrad education, and she saw a student and called him by name and said, "Stop by my office. I've just heard from some employer, and I think you'd be a really good match for that job." And I thought, this was October, by the way, and this was for like the following year. And so she knew off the top of her head exactly what student she would recommend for that particular position. And so you'll often have those connections through different departments or through the Career Center. And about 90% of our students will do an internship. So one summer, Duke summers fill up pretty quickly, but one summer is often spent on that internship. Just as an anecdote, I was at a tailgate and there was a young woman there who was a sorority advisor who did not go to Duke, but she was working with her sorority at Duke, and she said, "Wow, Duke students are so impressive. It's only September and all of these girls are worrying about what their jobs are going to be because some already have them and the others are worried that they don't yet." And she said, "I didn't even think about getting a job until after I graduated." And so there's certainly that drive among our students and that sense of wanting to have everything in place. But I think that also comes from the fact that those opportunities are certainly there. I mentioned that I would talk about some signature opportunities, so I want to be sure that I do this because it's kind of like I talked about flexibility and community and collaboration, and those are all great sort of thematic things, but what are some of the specifics that I think really make a Duke education valuable beyond the student life in the classroom? So one of those is the ability to study away from campus, and so you might incorporate study abroad. About half of our students do, and that includes a third of our engineering students. And we run our own programs, and we've pre-approved other colleges' programs. So we want to give you the world open as available to you, and that's one way we do that. And as I said, about half of our students will do that. We also want students to take advantage of the fact that we're a research university. And so you can get funding for research beginning in your freshman year, second semester. Sometimes students will come to Duke having done research. Others will find a professor or a subject area and kind of explore it a little bit. Maybe you start at freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, or even senior year, depending on what your interests are. And then you would work on a thesis and a presentation from there. And you can get that funding, as I said, freshman year. We also have some formalized research programs. So there's something called Pratt Research Fellows, where engineering students are matched with engineering professors on specific projects. There's also something called Bass Connections, where undergrad students, grad students, and faculty are part of a research team, and each person has their own component of that research. Often it involves going somewhere in the summer and doing research projects together, and then when you come back, you would sign up for an independent study to continue that work, and that of course is funded. And what's interesting about Bass Connections is that it's looking at global problems. So there's definitely a really strong sense of globalization at Duke. So those things include information technology, brain science, energy, education, and healthcare. So 5 things that are important all over the world. And then there will be smaller focus points for the research in that area. And then we have an opportunity called Duke Engage. So whereas study abroad is all about the academic experience internationally, Duke Engage is an enrichment program that's open to any undergrad at Duke who wants to spend a summer immersed in a service learning opportunity. So you would apply for it in your freshman year, sophomore year, whenever it is you think you want to spend this following summer. There are about a dozen US locations, and then there's hundreds of locations worldwide. So every summer, probably about 400 or 500 students will go to some other place and work on a service project. So some of it may be healthcare related, others may be engineering infrastructure projects. I've had students I know have worked on policy at nonprofit organizations. My friend's daughter did sea turtle conservation in Turkey, even though she's now in med school. So it was completely unrelated to exactly what she wanted to do. But it was a way for her to just have that experience and to have that sense of giving back. And so unlike, when people are sometimes criticized for volunteerism, when you come back from Duke Engage, there are some capstone projects that students do to really integrate that. And then the other piece is that because when Duke has its own programs, these are long established programs so that we continue to have students keeping those things going. And it's not just dropping in somewhere and pulling out, but it's really being part of helping that local community. So that's yet another example. I could probably go on with some more things. There are, during spring break, you have the chance to stay on campus and do classes that are purely about enrichment. And so one of those there was one that was looking at canine cognition, and we have this great canine cognition lab on campus, a puppy kindergarten where people can bring their dogs and sort of train them, I guess, in a way, and then they're observed to see what kinds of commands the dogs are listening to, and sort of like what can they understand, which then informs like what can we as humans understand. Or just to talk about the one resource that is like near and dear to my heart, because it's my daughter's thing, is the Duke Lemur Center. So my UD daughter actually is studying anthropology and has spent some summers working at the Duke Lemur Center, mainly as a tour guide, but also just really understanding the behavior of prosimian primates that are native to Madagascar, and just has made her really interested in animal behavior and so on. So there's all of these things that you can do to kind of take your interest maybe in a slightly different direction. So does that bring up any questions or anything that we're thinking about that I haven't covered? I feel like I've kind of hit the big themes, but I'm sure there's always fun questions that people have about what it's, I mean, not that I could tell you necessarily what it's like to be a student at Duke, but I can try. So.
Do you guys offer 3-2 or 4-1 programs?
Some. So for example, you mentioned engineering being an interest of yours, and you can do a Master of Engineering Management program where in your senior year and then the 5th year you would take a combination of engineering and classes from our business school, so you'd get that master's degree. We have a Master of Education program like that. There's, I believe, also perhaps a Master of Engineering program that does the same thing. It's not a big piece of what we do, but there are those kinds of opportunities. Also, I'm sure that out there in the video land, there are some students who might have business interests, and so sometimes students worry, what am I going to do about business? Duke doesn't have an undergrad business school. Well, certainly economics is a way to follow that. We have a finance minor. We have a certificate in markets and management studies. As I mentioned, a lot of recruiters are coming to campus to recruit our students almost regardless of what their undergraduate majors are. But those are some of the opportunities that students would have for business study. And then at the graduate level, in addition to having the MBA program that's separate, we do have a 1-year Master of Management degree that our students can apply for after they graduate. And so a lot of times students might come in and pick a major that's in the liberal arts and then say, well, let me get some practical coursework here, so let me take 1 more year of management to do that. So that's another possibility that's out there. Anything else? Go ahead. Yep.
So I'm trying to rephrase the question.
Okay.
They're pretty much asking the difference in terms of competitiveness of applying regular decision versus ED.
Okay, that's easy to understand. So we do offer the 2 different programs. As students I know are pretty well versed here on what regular is versus early decision. So we are a binding early decision school. When you look at the acceptance rates, and you can find these things online, so if you're not physically here, I have this brochure that I'll hand out to the 2 students who are physically here, but you can find this online. There's no question when you look at the stats that there is an advantage in early decision. I like to say a couple things about that. So one is that, yes, we are happy to grant admission to students who are strong and who are going to want to come and be part of our class. At the same time, we know that not everybody's ready to either make that commitment or to financially make that commitment. So I'll say a couple things. I have 2 daughters. The older one didn't decide until April 30th where she was going to college, and May 1st is the deadline. So even though her mother has worked in admissions her whole life, didn't make her choice any easier. And then my younger daughter, who's at UD, decided fall of junior year that that was her top choice, and provided that she got in, that's where she was going to go. So even in my own family, I've seen both situations. In terms of early decision, we're not going to take weaker academic students simply because they've applied early. It's just that we have so many talented students applying that when students are making the commitment to us, we don't want to turn away a student who we find would be a really strong match for Duke, and which is why we take them when we can. But if you want to be able to have a variety of choices, or from a financial standpoint, you'd get the same financial aid package in early as you would in regular, but what you lose is the ability to say, well, Duke is offering me this, and that this is what the state school costs, and this is what this school with merit scholarship costs. When you apply early decision and are admitted, you lose the ability to compare it against those other schools, but you would receive the same need-based financial aid package. Now, we will release families from the early decision commitment for financial reasons so that you can apply elsewhere without us saying, oh, the student, didn't follow the rules, but you then give up your space at Duke. So I think that there's a lot of reasons that students want to wait. We recognize that, particularly for students who may be first generation, maybe considering financial options in a varying degrees. So we will put that into context as well. But if you are leaning early decision, certainly there is a little bit of an advantage, well, more than a little bit of an advantage there. Let me just talk briefly about need-based financial aid because I think that's a big, important question. So we are need blind for U.S. citizens, permanent residents, and undocumented students. We meet need of the students, international citizens whom we admit. But we meet everybody, 100% of everyone's full demonstrated need. Now, a lot of students today at some other visits were saying, so you just meet everything we need and want? And I said, well, there's a little bit of a difference because we do use the FAFSA and profile to determine what we believe your family can afford to contribute to the cost of Duke. And then whatever the difference is what we define as your demonstrated need. My first message is always don't cross Duke off your list for financial reasons until you've gone through the process and see, because a lot of times people are very surprised to learn how much financial aid they may in fact get. I made that mistake. My parents made that mistake when I was looking at colleges and just said, well, we're not going to get financial aid, and your brother's going in 2 years, and you're going to be a teacher, so pick a state teacher's college, which is what I did, and I had a good college experience, but maybe it was not the ideal fit for me, but we didn't bother to go through the whole process. So don't do as I did, do as I say. Along with that, I think it's important to note that we cap loans. So loans may range anything from no loan to up to $5,000 a year. So we're not saying Duke costs all of this money, which it does, and you're going to fund it all with loans, because I would never want students to take out loans that are beyond what we include as a reasonable part of your financial aid package. And so consider financial aid, consider that we offer it, have a variety of choices sort of, in different kinds of opportunities, but don't rule out Duke because of cost, because students really do receive significant need-based financial aid. I also have some colleagues who work as admissions officers who have found Duke to be really affordable for their families, and so, and they're able to pay back their loans. And believe me when I say that admissions officers are not the highest paid of our recent Duke grads, but they are able to do it and still live in apartments. One young woman bought a townhouse and has a dog and is, all those kinds of things, and is still paying back some student loans. But and I know she's not somebody who's going to be just getting herself in all kinds of debt, because that's just not her values. So it is definitely doable, but obviously keep your options open. Any questions about the admissions process beyond the early decision, regular decision question? I'm going to make sure that I don't miss anything. I know you're being well counseled. I've been hearing a little bit lately about from both our dean and some other people at the College Board Forum that I was just at, where they're talking a lot about essays. And so seniors, I know, are kind of finalizing essays, maybe submitting essays. So I'll say a couple things. One is that if every other aspect of your application is strong, and then we get to the essay and it's just fine, it's not going to keep you from being admitted. You know, it will be, we want to admit you. It's very rare for an essay to turn the application the other direction. That said, an essay can also be the big wow factor for some students in the application. And so it's hard to measure, you know, how much time, you know, well, obviously it's individualized how much time you spend on it, but how much stress do you want to put yourself through on the essay? The best advice I have is to not feel like you have to tell us everything. You know, pick an anecdote. Just give us a little bit of a lens into who you are, what's important to you. Also use the essay as an opportunity to maybe shed some light on something that otherwise wouldn't be there. So my older daughter was a ballerina, did a lot of dance, and I told her, it's very clear to admissions people that you have devoted your life to dance. Do not write your essay about dance. We've got that. That's covered. And that's the only advice I gave her. You know, the rest of the essay was all on her. But it was really good to see her then discuss something else. And she wanted to be in a big city, and she was talking about the importance of the diversity and all of those things. And that's exactly what she wrote her essay about. And she went to school in a big city, and now she lives in one too. So that's just an example. The other thing is, in the Duke application specifically, we ask you, why are you interested in Duke? And it's absolutely fine to use some of the things that I've said today or that you see on our website as far as this is why Duke is appealing to me. But then what you want to do is just take it a step further and say then why that is important to you. So it's not just like, oh, you have a really great collaborative community. Yes, we know that. But why is that something that you personally find appealing? Were you part of that type of community in high school? Were you not part of that type of community and you're really seeking it? Personalizing all of the responses would be the sort of my key recommendation there. So don't stress over the essay, but pay it some attention, think about it, share it with people. Does this sound like me? We're really looking for to learn about you. I've read tens of thousands of essays over the years as I stop and think about it. And it is really rare that I ever read an essay and I don't think that the student wrote it. You can kind of get a feel for who the student is and in the rest of the application. And the essay usually fits in that puzzle really nicely. I think you guys have allowed me to cover every possible thing to say today. Any last questions popping up on the feed? Okay, well, everybody out there that I'm not seeing, good luck with your college applications, and I hope to see some of them coming Duke's way. And wherever you end up, you'll have some really good choices because I know you've gotten some really great advice. Well, thank you.